Hello everyone, Darsonovi here. I feel like it's time to do another segment on stupid shit EU's haters say. I was hoping to save this episode for later, but due to a certain someone, I won't mention his name, he inspired me to do this video because I think it's time that I put some of these EU haters in their place. And they say the EU was never canon. Now, I have 3 separate sources, 2 of them which are from the novels themselves. One of them is written by Papagato. You know, the guy that you claim his word is law. Well, he wrote this before the expanded universe was declared non-canon. So I'll use his own words against you. Now, let's use George's words first. You know, the guys like to say, oh, George Lucas never said it wasn't canon. All right. I'll bring up some points later in the video, but let's read the introduction to Splinter of Mind's Eye. This was added in the reprint in the 1990s. Now, before we begin, there's a certain someone out there, Pedophile Express, that said that the EU is fan fiction. Now, last time I checked, you can't publish fan fiction. Now, here's the copyright for this novel. Splinter of Mind's Eye, was copyright 1978 by the Star Wars Corporation. All right, reserved. Yada, 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 any little typical thing that you hear about in a novel. The reprint of this, Del Rey Max Market Edition, 2015, the one with the Legends banner. So this was published in 1978. There's evidence to support that. If you're to claim this is fan fiction, this has existed for nearly 40 years. That's that novel. Now let's read the introduction, shall we? By George Lucas. It wasn't long after I began writing Star Wars that I realized the story was more than a single film could hold as the saga of Skywalkers and Jedi Knights unfolded. I began to see it as a tale that could take at least 9 films to tell, 3 trilogies, and I realized in making my way through the backstory and after story, that was really setting up to write the middle story. Well, you don't know, I was set up to write the middle story. After Star Wars was released, it became apparent that my stories, how many films it took to tell, was only one of thousands that could be told about the characters who inhabit its galaxy. But those were not the stories I was destined to tell. Instead, they would spring from the imagination of other writers inspired by the glimpse of a galaxy that Star Wars provided. Today is an amazing, if unexpected, legacy of Star Wars that so many gifted writers. Gifted? If George Lucas had no respect, why did he say gifted writers? Obviously, he respected these authors enough to say that. Or contribute new stories to the saga. This legacy began with Splinter of the Mind's Eye, published less than a year after the release of Star Wars, written by Alan Dean Foster, a well-known and talented science fiction author. Splinter was promoted as a further adventure of Luke Skywalker. It hit the bookshelves just as I was preparing to write my own further adventure of Luke, in the form of a script entitled The Empire Strikes Back. It seems only fitting after all these years that Splinter would be republished as I prepare once again to write a further adventure set a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. That was written, that introduction, in the reprint of Splinter of Mind's Eye in the 90s, as George Lucas was preparing to make the prequels. Now, if George Lucas never vowed the EU, why would he say such good things about the writers in the introduction of the grandfather of the Star Wars Expanded Universe? I'll talk further in detail, but in the future. But this was a proposed sequel of the original Star Wars. For EU haters, this was the first sequel conceived, not Empire Strikes Back. Now, New Jedi Order, another source to confirm that it was canon. Here's an interview that with various authors about New Jedi Order. I'm not going to read the entire thing in here. I got to find the exact quote in here. But there was ideas that George Lucas vetoed in this series. All of it can be found here. Examples. Luke Skywalker was one person they thought they should kill off to set things up for New Jedi Order. George Lucas vetoed that. He had set rules in the EU. Have you ever wondered why they never killed off the 3PO, R2, and Luke? Those were the three characters that were off limits to kill off in the EU. If George Lucas never cared, he would let the authors do what they wanted. Anakin Solo was killed off instead of Jason, because George Lucas didn't want two Anakins to exist in the same universe. Same universe. Same universe, you say. Of course, some of you may say, oh, heresy. What you're saying is bullshit. All of this can be found here. All of it. Everything I say can be found in here. That's another evidence. Also, the Yuuzhan Vong were originally supposed to be Sith. Well, not Sith, whatever. Darksiders. George Lucas vetoed that idea too. And New Jedi Order was originally not supposed to be part of the same universe as the rest of the Star Wars universe. But due to pressure by fans, they gave in and they kept everything in canon because fans who were reading these novels wanted one cohesive universe. Now, if it wasn't canon, why would it be important to the fans at the time and Lucasfilm to pressure the Del Rey to keep the New Jedi Order with continuity with the movies and the novels in the Bantam era? It's obvious. And the evidence can be found here, further to prove that the EU was canon. There's no way they would treat it as one cohesive universe if it wasn't. I'm going to save the best for last, but they had to go through George to do big decisions with a character in the EU. If George Lucas never cared, why did they need approval for Luke to marry Mara Jade? If George Lucas never cared, why did he veto the idea of a Yoda story? That's right. In the old expanded universe, you cannot find one single Yoda story in his youth, or his species name, or his homeworld's name. George Lucas believed that Yoda should remain a mysterious character, which I'm in full agreement with that. I doubt Disney's going to respect that, but that's exactly the point. Even Papagato, who hates the expanded universe, his beautiful things on Twitter states perfectly how he feels. Here's something from the Essentials Reader's Companion, something that Papagato wrote back in 2013 when it was published. This was published a year before the decanonization of the expanded universe. More evidence to support that the EU was canon. If it wasn't one cohesive universe, why would they bother writing this? Not to mention, why would George Lucas be so involved in making saying yes or no in certain decisions? Why are there no Clone Wars, era novels in the time that when the expanded universe was at its infancy, when it was still getting big? Why wasn't there any in the 90s? You won't find a single one. Because George Lucas wanted to tell that story. If he didn't treat it as canon, he would not have cared what they did. This isn't like the Star Trek EU or any other expanded universe out there. Star Wars took continuity very seriously. Now, evidence that the EU was canon. The introduction by Papagato. Before Star Wars graced the silver screen of hacked movie hero horses, its story was prepared in an eager public by the printed word of an tie-in novel based on the screenplay of Star Wars arrived in bookshelves over 5 months prior to the film's debut on May 25th, 1977, helping to spread awareness of the movie to come in pre-digital world of Mal Page. As such, the very first Star Wars fans were readers. That's right. The very first Star Wars fans were readers. You heard it from his mouth. Pappagallo. One of the biggest promoters of the destruction of the expanded universe, who wanted to reboot it in 2005, said that, and I'll read it again. The film's debut in May 25th, 1977, helping to spare winners of the movie to come in pre-digital world of Mouth of Age. As such, the very first Star Wars fans were readers. Yes, real Star Wars fans, according to your logic, Pedophile Express, read the very first novel to ever exist, the novelization of the very first Star Wars movie, which also was the very first time in any source they've ever mentioned the Emperor by his name, which they wouldn't call him Palpatine until future novels of the expanded universe, and they wouldn't call him Palpatine in the movies until episode 1. So his name came from the novels first. And the expanded universe is 5 months older than the movies themselves. So, more evidence. Of course, there's some more I could in here, but that was just a snippet. I'm not going to read any more because if you really care about proving me wrong, you would investigate these sources yourself. Of course, these are one of many sources that I can list. The Reader's Companion is the ultimate defense for the EU. Yes, contradictions do exist. Obviously. A continuity that went on for over 3 decades is bound to have a contradiction. But at least it kept things together. At least it didn't have a bunch of contradictions in 1 year, like the Disney canon does. And if that isn't enough for you, I have a better one. I'll give you a link to Matt Wilkins' videos. It's a playlist that has every single video that he's done defending the EU. He does it better than I ever can to defend it. But these are various examples. If you want to refute what I say, you have the means to find those sources. You are able to do it. You can prove me wrong, but you're not going to. Splinter of Mind's Eye. Buy this novel. The introduction's in here. I didn't make it up. The interview in this novel is also in here, which explains the writing process, what we on a New Jedi Order, and what they were thinking of doing, what they could and could not do. All that's in there. That exact snippet I've read was in this one. Now to kick it all off, I'm gonna tell you the release date of the very first Star Wars novel. And this isn't Wikipedia. This came from an official licensed Lucasfilm book that was published. This is the best defense of the EU, in my opinion, besides The Force Awakens, in my opinion, which Matt Wilkins is right about that. That's a good way to defend the movie, considering The Force Awakens in itself is a way to defend it by showing people how unoriginal that movie is. Now, is this meant to start a war? No. This is just to showcase that everything that people have been feeding you for all these years is complete bullshit. Now, the very first Star Wars novel to ever be published, the paperback, and it was known as Star Wars: The Adventures of Luke Skywalker. December 1976. That was the first edition. Paperback, May 1977. And hardcover, October 1977, as Star Wars for the Adventures of Luke Skywalker. Tie-in novel. Paperback, 1994, as Classic Star Wars: A New Hope. Hardcover, September, as Star Wars. Paperback, January 1997, and August 1999, as Star Wars: A New Hope. These list the various release dates of various different editions, but the most important one is December 1976. Why is that important? Because Star Wars 40th anniversary is coming up in a few months. That's right. Star Wars turns 40 in a few months because of the novel. This is an official source licensed by Lucasfilm. You could say this doesn't matter. It does, because this list is the release date of all the novels that were published at the time this was. I could pull out some more if you want, but I have some evidence in those 3 books alone that the EU was canon. It wasn't fan fiction, because you can't publish fan fiction. That's stupid. To end this video, you know what all books have is what this has. The usual copyright mumbo jumbo. Now, if the EU is fan fiction, why haven't these authors been sued up the ass? Because you can't publish fan fiction. You can't. You just can't. It's not possible. Unless you want to get sued up the ass by Disney and Lucasfilm, you cannot publish fan fiction. I'm done. I'll give you the link to Matt Wilkins' videos, because if you don't believe me and you want to know more, go there. He could do it better than I can, explaining why the EU was canon and why the anti-EU propaganda is complete bullshit. Later.